When Israel Kugler began to teach at New York City Technical College in 1947, he described the professional conditions for faculty as beyond belief. Is organized a union, and by 1956, salaries had risen by 40 to 50%, teaching loads had been cut, working conditions had greatly improved, and the New York State Legislature had granted the faculty statutory tenure, the first tenure law for community colleges in the United States. Friends, and even those not so supportive, agreed that much of this was the result of Is Kugler's courage, persistence, and intelligence. It was the first step in a career that was to make him one of the major figures in higher education unionism. Is was born in 1917. His parents came from Tsarist Russia, and they were supporters of the Jewish labor movement, which included the Workmen's Circle, an organization that provided members with benefit programs and educational opportunities for children and adults. As a child, Is was exposed to the democratic socialism of the Jewish labor movement through the schools and camps of the Workmen's Circle. At age 12, Is Kugler joined the Young People's Socialist League. He is seen here, age 14, front row, 6 from the left, at a convention of the group in 1931. Despite the privation of the Great Depression of the 1930s and his father's poor health, Is's parents sacrificed to allow their son to attend City College. Although this was common enough in its time, it is nonetheless compelling in each individual case. Is Kugler continued his commitment to socialist politics in the famous City College cafeteria alcoves, but he also managed to complete his courses, graduating, as we see here, in 1938. After a brief stint as a machinist at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, he immediately joined the Union. Is served in the United States Navy during World War II. On his return, he began teaching and arrived at New York City Technical College in its first year, 1947. Is had affiliated his union at the New York City Technical College with the teachers' labor movement in 1953 through the Teachers Guild, Local 2 of the American Federation of Teachers. After this union became the United Federation of Teachers and organized the public schools in New York City, Is had the American Federation of Teachers charter a separate local for higher education, called the United Federation of College Teachers, UFCT. He became the union's president and set out to organize in both public and private colleges and universities. The UFCT immediately began its work within the City University of New York, CUNY, and also among the private institutions. Here is protesting the proposed sale of Long Island University, without its faculty, in the mid-1960s. The UFCT negotiated contracts with several institutions, the first at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. Immediately to Is's left is Irving Pankin, a longtime staff member of the UFCT and later the Professional Staff Congress. Immediately in front of is Lou Stoller, who soon became president of the union local at the Fashion Institute of Technology and still holds that post today. The UFCT also negotiated a contract with the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York. In addition, Is gained collective bargaining agreements at several other colleges in the New York area, including Pratt Institute and Westchester Community College. As president of the UFCT, Is also did a great deal of lobbying in Albany. Here we see him, in 1966, with Senator John J. Markey, center of the photograph, Republican from Staten Island, who still serves today. In this photograph from the same period, Is conferring with Senator Joseph Zaretsky, the longtime Democratic leader in the state Senate. He also spoke frequently on behalf of the City University. Here Is testifies in the late 1960s before the New York City Board of Estimate for restorations of the CUNY budget. Is Kugler believed that a higher education union should be part of the larger labor movement. Here he marches with a group from the New York City Central Labor Council in support of the United Farm Workers and the boycott on grapes. The UFCT's most famous campaign was the strike at St. John's University from late 1965 until well into 1966. The strike was forced by St. John's firing of 31 faculty, including Father Peter O'Reilly, seen here, who wanted an increase in their substandard salaries and were prepared to organize a union to improve their professional conditions. The UFCT accepted the challenge of representing these faculty, and it began a massive effort on their behalf. Not only did this include picketing during a very harsh winter, but the formation of a National Citizens Committee for the Defense of Academic Freedom at St. John's University. Here we see Is Kugler speaking at one of their rallies. Charles Cogan, president of the American Federation of Teachers, is seen at the extreme left, and John Leo, editor of the magazine Commonweal, stands next to Kugler. Bayard Rustin, the civil rights activist and organizer of the 1963 March on Washington, also gave full support to the strike. Is gained the support of the New York State AFL-CIO. He is seen here speaking at the organization's convention. Although the strike ultimately failed, it gave new visibility to unionism in higher education and helped encourage the widespread organizing activities of the late 1960s and 1970s. The UFCT was active in CUNY from 1963 on, in competition with another faculty organization, the Legislative Conference, headed by Belle Zeller, seen here. In 1968, a collective bargaining election in CUNY divided representation of the faculty and professional staff between the UFCT and the Legislative Conference. Each organization negotiated its first contract in 1969. However, competition continued, and it threatened the viability of both groups. In April 1972, the two unions merged to form the Professional Staff Congress, PSC. Belle Zeller became the president, and Israel Kugler the deputy president. The new union had to negotiate a contract with a recalcitrant CUNY administration. This led to many lengthy bargaining sessions. Seen here to Iz's left is the union's chief negotiator, Executive Director Arnold Cantor, Belle Zeller, and First Vice President Erwin Polishuk. Negotiations stalemated, and the PSC began a campaign for public support. The PSC also gained support from the labor movement. At this contract rally in October 1972, we see Israel Kugler with his ever-present pipe. The third person to his right is Tom Hobart, then, as now, president of the New York State United Teachers. Immediately to Hobart's left is Albert Shanker, president of the United Federation of Teachers. To Kugler's left, at the end of the table, is Dave Selden, the president of the American Federation of Teachers. Ultimately, an agreement was reached that set the pattern for all succeeding PSC-CUNY contracts. Attention soon turned to saving CUNY as a fiscal crisis in New York City took center stage. Here Iz and Belle Zeller picket against budget cuts. Immediately preceding them is Professor Lilia Malani, who initiated and led the successful effort, strongly supported by the PSC, to secure pay equity for women in CUNY. The merger that created the PSC did not end all competition between the former organizations. There were contested elections for officers in 1973 and 1976. Israel Kugler narrowly lost for president in 1973. After a defeat in 1976, he merged his caucus with the majority group to form a united union that has had the strength to meet its many challenges. In 1980, Iz retired from CUNY, but continued his busy life. In the same year, he became president of the Workmen's Circle, which crowned a lifetime of involvement with that organization. Here is welcomes Lane Kirkland, president of the AFL-CIO, and his wife, Irina, into membership in the Workmen's Circle. Iz remained as president until 1984. He now turned to the scholarship that had to be put aside during his busy public career. In 1987, Iz published From Ladies to Women, The Organized Struggle for Women's Rights, about the women's rights movement of the 1860s. He has also written 2 articles for Labor's Heritage, as well as opinion pieces of various types. Iz is still active in many organizations. He never lost the energy of those early years at New York City Technical College, nor has he given up the courage of conviction and concern for justice that have marked his entire life. Israel Kugler is a pioneer in academic unionism who has lived to see his work greatly advanced. This is truly his fullest reward.